Hi, I'm Tu Rinsha, and I'm the author and host of Do the Diligence, a media platform that advances human rights in global supply chains. In each episode, we highlight and amplify the voices of the people strengthening, building, and testing human rights due diligence in real time. And today, I'm so lucky to have my friend Marcia Eugenio join me. Welcome, Marcia.
Thank you, too. Thank you for opening up this space
Absolutely.
to have this conversation.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, especially given your tremendous background working on human rights issues. I'd love to learn a little bit more, and I know our audience would as well, just your journey. How did you get involved in working on these issues?
So I grew up in the Dominican Republic, and child labor was part of daily life. I saw children working in agriculture, shoe shining, and domestic service. My mother also was a big advocate for education and for us appreciating the education that we were getting, particularly because she had to leave school to work when she was a child, and she wanted us to not have to do the same. When I came to the U.S., I studied international affairs and public policy. And when I got to the Department of Labor, it was my first official job. I focused on occupational safety and health, on immigration issues and trade. But it wasn't until I was asked to go do research on international child labor in the Dominican Republic, looking at codes of conduct, that I actually, that it hit home for me, right? I went back to the Dominican Republic and I was studying labor practices in garment factories, but I was also seeing children again in agriculture, domestic service, in informal work. And I realized that these are not isolated issues, that they're interconnected, they're systemic. And that became my calling, my commitment professionally to work on these issues. And that's also why I started Better Trade Collective, because I wanted to use the experience that I was getting to help governments and companies and stakeholders out there understand how these issues are interconnected and what we can do together to address them.
No, that's great. And I know that, you've been in government, the U.S. Department of Labor, for more than 3 decades. So you've seen and you've funded a lot of initiatives around the world trying to address forced labor and child labor in supply chains. Where do you see the greatest opportunities right now?
So the greatest opportunity that I see in addressing is actually making the case of why good labor practices is good for your business. Looking at how can you as a company institute and ensure that you have good labor practices. Paying your workers, making sure that people are not discriminated, making sure that there are grievance mechanisms, and how that actually makes you make a better product and have more quality product, to have workers that don't call in sick and that actually show up and are proud of the work that they're doing. And that is actually good for your business. So I see an opportunity there in kind of working with companies to accomplish that goal.
Obviously, it's much easier said than done, so it takes a lot of work to get there, right? Like, there are a lot of obstacles and steps. In this work that you're doing previously, but also now working with business, what are some big shifts or trends that you're observing?
So some of the big shifts, I think we all are seeing it right now, which is the use of trade tools to address labor enforcement. And that could be WROs or withhold release orders from CBP, but also Section 301 investigations from USTR. And I know that those are complicated terms for people who are not familiar with them. But the bottom line is that the U.S. government and other governments as well, European governments, are actually moving away from voluntary compliance to more mandatory compliance of supply chain and due diligence. So that is a big shift that we should all pay attention, because it creates more risk for companies, and those risks are real. I mean, it could potentially have your goods stopped at the border or not have access to market.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the business case for respecting human rights in supply chains is growing, right? There are a variety of different risks, not only for reputational risks, but also, like you said, there are legal, there are severe operational risks from these import bans. So the world of voluntary initiatives and voluntary CSR, voluntary compliance, it is over. Right, and to your point, it really is about mandatory due diligence today. I'd love to hear kind of, again, from your previous background, but also what you're doing now, like what does good look like for a company?
For a company, in the work that we're doing, in the work that you're doing, I think that good looks like a company that has really good systems in place, and where if they're ever in an enforcement situation, that there are no surprises there, that they've actually put together a package of information, or they have like these procedures in place, and they know what they are, they know where the risks are, and that they can respond confidently if an enforcement action comes their way. And that's what we're working towards, and working with different companies and different stakeholders to advance that, that environment where companies are very sure of what is expected of them.
Yeah, and there's a lot of information out there for companies to understand their risk. And I know when you were at the Department of Labor, your team developed a number of those tools, right? Including the Child Labor Forced Labor Report, the list of goods produced with child labor and forced labor. So these are known risks that could potentially impact any company's supply chain. In terms of your work at the Better Trade Collective, for example, what's 2 pieces of guidance that you would really impress upon companies right now where they could take action immediately?
Well, the first one is understand the language of the regulators. You want to understand what CBP expectations are when they talk about remediation, what that means for you as a company. The second piece of guidance is have your information ready. Given the environment that we're in, where we have 138 million children working on child labor, and we have over 50 million children in forced labor, the likelihood that your supply chain is tainted by these labor abuses is high. So I would recommend to any company to be prepared. The enforcement action may not be today, but it may be tomorrow. And the more that you're prepared to answer questions about what you're doing and how you're doing it, the better you will fare in a situation where there's an enforcement action. And that's what Better Trade Collective is trying to do. We're trying to translate the expectations that CBP has into the work that you're doing. We want to help people use the tools that are available from the Department of Labor. CBP is actually coming up with some tools as well later this summer in remediation, and basically telling you what is expected in terms of addressing a forced labor violation. So those are really good tools, and I'm excited about those as well.
That is really helpful. You know, as we are witnessing today with regards to what companies have to deal with, engage, and know more about their supply chains, obviously conducting due diligence is one of those big endeavors, but now enforcement is coming to play. And I think that your perspective is so important, having been on inside of government, but also on the regulatory side of things. But I always end my conversation, I know we could talk forever about this topic, but I always end this conversation with, what are you excited about? I mean, you're working on really tough topics, Marcia.
Yeah.
But what gives you joy right now?
Well, on the professional side, I'm excited about the CBP guidance that is coming out soon. I mean, I think that that will be very helpful. It will clarify the expectations for companies, and it's something that we helped develop when I was in the Department of Labor, so I'm very proud of that. The other one is I'm doing some historical research and analysis on child labor and forced labor in trying to understand U.S. engagement for the last 30 years and what worked and why. So I want to be able to share those tools with colleagues that are working in the area and with companies that could actually benefit from understanding that perspective.
Well, thank you for that, Marcia. So if you don't know Marcia, please do read her detailed Q&A, which we on Substack, and follow Marcia on LinkedIn. Some exciting news in terms of some of the tools that will be coming out from these different groups. But thank you, Marcia, for your time. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much, too, for doing this.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.